Former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger recently made some pretty candid comments about how his painful fallout with Donald Trump led to a much more painful fallout with family and friends. And he also gave his assessment of the 2024 election and the current state of his Republican Party. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, I have several clips to play, but just to provide some context, we've talked about Adam Kinzinger in previous videos. He was a Republican congressman representing Illinois, and he was a devout Republican. And we'll get to that in a second. We will provide proof because many Republicans now say that he wasn't, that he was a Republican in name only. It's nonsense. But he was a devout Republican congressman, and he was loyal to Donald Trump. He was loyal to the GOP under the MAGA influence until Donald Trump attempted to steal the 2020 election, culminating in the January 6th insurrection. And that's when Adam Kinzinger, alongside Liz Cheney, said, enough's enough. Even though they voted for Trump in 2020, right? That's how loyal they were. They said enough's enough. And then they joined the January 6th House Select Committee, and they were the two Republicans on that bipartisan panel. Now, again, before I play the clips, I just want to remind everybody, Adam Kinzinger was, in fact, a loyal Republican. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either a liar, an idiot, or ignorant, or perhaps some sort of combination thereof. But 538 has his voting record. During the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency, Adam Kinzinger voted with Trump 99% of the time. That's staggering. Even during the latter 2 years, okay, he voted with Trump 83.5% of the time, which is still a vast and overwhelming majority. And then he voted for Trump in 2020. Adam Kinzinger was a loyal Republican even under Donald Trump's leadership. So with that in mind, I want to play these clips. And again, this is the revelations here and the anecdotes, the stories here are very interesting. But this is Adam Kinzinger talking about a letter he received from family members.
So I had family that sent a certified letter disowning me. They said, I've lost the trust of great men like Sean Hannity. Just funny, but they believe that.
So he was sent a letter by the members or by some members of his own family disowning him, saying that he lost the trust of Sean Hannity for betraying Donald Trump. And here, in an interview with The Bulwark, he provides additional context about that letter.
I lived in Shanahan, Illinois, and I would go down and visit my folks in Bloomington maybe once a month, right? Mm-hmm. So I go down on this once a month journey, and it happens to be the time that my dad's basically his kind of cousins, a big group of them.
Okay.
This certified letter shows up to me, to my parents' house. I'm like, oh, okay, well, interesting, good timing. I start reading it, and the first two words were, oh my, and I was, naive enough to think they were going to be like, oh my, how brave you have been. And it says, oh my, what a disappointment you are to us and to God. That was how it opened. Mm-hmm. And then it just went on, you've lost the trust of great men like Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, and like a few others in there. And I'm like, if you ever wonder if it's a cult, all you have to do is just look at what is the thing that they are upset at me about. And it wasn't much about principle. It was all about losing the trust of great men like Sean Hannity.
And we're going to play more of that clip in just a second. But guys, think about that. He got a letter from members of his own family saying, disowning him, saying that he was a disappointment to them and to God. And if you're devoutly religious, if you're, devoutly religious person, that would be like the ultimate insult, right? The idea that you're a disappointment to the divine creator. And Adam Kinzinger is devoutly religious, right? I mean, just imagine that double punch. Right? And he even says, he's acknowledged that the Republican Party has become a cult. His family members are in a cult. I'm just trying to imagine how painful of an admission that would be. Consider that in context.
I laugh about it because to me it is just so ridiculous. But since I got out of Congress, I use the analogy of nobody has PTSD while they're in combat. It's when you're out. And it's been kind of coming to grips with the impact that's had. And, things like my co-pilot in Iraq, one of the guys I should be closest with sending me a text a year ago that says he's ashamed to have ever flown with me and ever served with me. Why? Yeah. Why? Because I told him the truth about January 6th or I'm not in his cult. And it's a real impact. And it's not, I tell a lot of my story. I wasn't even the one that released that letter, by the way. She's so crazy that the one that led that she released it, somehow thinking it would turn people. But I say that because everybody's got a story like that.
Yeah, everyone's got a story.
And I'm sure
like
Thanksgiving's going to have even more.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's a reminder that Adam Kinzinger was a veteran, right? He served in Iraq. And so, something that I'm not a veteran, but I know veterans. I have veterans in the family and veterans who are friends. And you hear them talk about the brotherhood or the camaraderie that they establish with their fellow soldiers when they're deployed, right? Blood brothers is the phrase that's very often used, or blood siblings, and just deeply profound bonds that often form. And the cult of Donald Trump, the MAGA cult, is so profound that it's not only turning family members against Adam Kinzinger, and they're also determining apparently that he has, been a colossal disappointment to God, but even people he has served with, his blood brothers, people whom he risked his life for and with, have also said that, he's a disgrace to them. Again, I'm trying to imagine the potency there. And the reason, even though I'm not a veteran, that it hits close to home is I have family members, very close family members. I have siblings and whatnot who support Donald Trump. And we haven't gotten to the point yet where I've been disowned by them or whatever, but you never know, right? I mean, that's when you're dealing with the current state of the Republican Party, you're kind of almost always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I know I'm not the only one. I'm certain, statistically speaking, it has to be the case that many of you watching are in the same boat. And it creates this enormous tension because it goes beyond the typical political situation. We're not just talking about policy disagreements, legitimate policy disagreements. To criticize Donald Trump very often, to oppose Donald Trump very often, is like opposing a religious figure to these people. So it's heartbreaking. This is the last clip I want to play. This is Adam Kinzinger talking about the stakes of the 2024 election and his assessment of the Republican Party. And to me, again, this is extremely powerful and will hopefully be a bit of a lighthouse for those independents or centrist conservatives who are struggling ahead of this election.
Do you still consider yourself a Republican?
So it's a tough question. I do, only in that because I don't want to give up on that fight. I mean, this country needs two healthy parties, a healthy Democratic Party and a healthy Republican. So I'm not going to give up that title. A country needs a good conservative and a good liberal movement at any time in their lives. I still have the title, but I voted Democratic last election cycle. If it's Trump against Joe Biden, I'll vote Democratic this coming one. Because, Anderson, I really believe it's down to one issue on the ballot. And not taxes, not even abortion, nothing. The one issue is, do you believe in democracy or do you believe in authoritarianism? And I think that's the only thing we should be voting on.
Again, it was incredibly powerful, incredibly candid. So I understand his impulse not to surrender the title of Republican. Now, I'm not a Republican. I have nothing but contempt for what this party has become. But I understand, since he is a lifelong conservative, he doesn't want to surrender the Republican Party to the chaos and dysfunction that it currently is. I disagree with him as well in terms of whether or not we need a healthy Republican Party. Nancy Pelosi said that as well. I do agree that as a bit of a break check, as a bit of a pause, you probably want somebody who's more conservative to just question and challenge a bit policy decisions. But I think actually the current state of the Republican Party has revealed the danger of empowering a right-wing conservative movement as much as it has. I've talked about in previous videos, the Republican Party and the right wing in this country enjoy one institutional advantage after another. It's pretty much the only reason that they've been able to remain competitive. Their policy ideas are not very popular. Their policies are not very effective. They lose on every major metric. Democrats are better stewards of the economy. They're better on social issues. The progressive movement will actually better the lives of not just marginalized groups and people in blue cities and blue states, but also conservative voters as well. Conservative voters are more likely to get health care under a progressive agenda. They're more likely to be taken care of in the future under progressive agenda, right? So just all these things make me question what Adam Kinzinger is saying there. I don't know if I believe that there has to be two co-equal parties in a functioning society. I think that the current state of the Republican Party leads that into question. But note how he ends his statement. He's openly admitting, as a lifelong conservative Republican who voted with Donald Trump 99% of the time, he's saying that above legitimate policy disagreements with President Biden and the Democrats, he thinks the topmost priority is preventing this democratic republic from falling into authoritarianism. And I would agree. I'm just trying to imagine a world in which there were a Democratic president, say President Biden, say President Obama, or say the next president, with whom I agree on most policy issues, but he or she wanted to suspend elections or steal elections or overturn elections, I would probably vote for a Republican, assuming that a Republican were the saner of option, which it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, right? Unless, but I'm trying to imagine, let's imagine it's 2012 and you have somebody like Mitt Romney running for the Republican Party, and you have somebody like President Obama. And let's say we had a different President Obama, a doppelganger, a President Obama with whom I agree on most policy issues, but somebody who wasn't faithful to the Constitution and faithful to democracy. Let's say after the 2012 election, Mitt Romney wins and President Obama refuses to leave office with a peaceful transfer of power. Let's say that Barack Obama does in 2012 what Donald Trump did in 2020. Well, then I would have wanted to vote for Mitt Romney, right? Because there are some things that trump policy. You can't have a progressive policy agenda if the country falls into authoritarianism, right? So Adam Kinzinger is absolutely correct here. And any sane Republican voter, any reasonable Republican voter, anybody who's not in the MAGA cult, whatever their legitimate disagreements may be with President Biden and the Democrats, they should prioritize the health of democracy over everything else. You should put country above party, above person. And if that's the ethic, if that's what you sincerely believe, then you have no choice but to vote Democrat in 2024. Let me know what you think in the comments.